Ja, då har turen kommit till Saniona, and now we will switch over to English because we have with us Chief Communications Officer Trista Morrison. A warm welcome to you, Tristan. Please just tell us, where are you in the world?
Hi, thank you so much for the warm welcome, and thank you for switching over to English on my behalf. I very much appreciate it. I am joining you from the Boston, Massachusetts area today. That is where Saniona's United States corporate office is located.
Okay, go ahead.
All right, well then we'll get started. So I'm delighted to tell you a bit more about Saniona today. We are a biotechnology company focused on rare diseases. I will be making forward-looking statements during the presentation today. That means I'll be making projections about milestones that are upcoming. So I just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. And I'd like to start out by just telling you a little bit about the Saniona team. So we're a relatively small biotechnology company, but we are looking to have a big impact and make a big difference in the lives of patients and families who are dealing with rare diseases. So right now we have about 50 employees, and we have 2 locations. So as I mentioned, I'm joining you from the Boston area in the United States, and that is where our corporate office is, and most of our leadership team is located. But we also have a corporate headquarters and a R&D facility, research and development operations, outside of the Copenhagen area. And so that is where our laboratories are, and that is where we discover all of the new medicines that we are working on. And then in addition to that, of course, we are traded on the Swedish Stock Exchange, so we have a Swedish presence as well. I'll just point out that about 2/3 of our employees are actually engaged in research and development. So the vast majority of our employees are working on discovering our new molecules in the labs, and then testing them, bringing them forward through the clinical trials that are required to get approval for them. So I want to talk for just a moment about rare diseases, because I mentioned that Saniona is focused on rare diseases, and some people in the audience are probably very familiar with this, but perhaps some others may be wondering why and what is a rare disease. So just some quick background here. A rare disease is defined by, in the United States, by the FDA as impacting less than 200,000 patients in the US. In the European Union, it's defined as less than 5 people in every 10,000. So we're not talking about, the big diseases like diabetes and cardiovascular disease. We're talking about diseases that affect a relatively small number of people. However, when you look at them all together, there's a huge unmet need here, because there have been 7,000 rare diseases identified, and less than 10% have medicines. So most of these patients and their families, they are struggling to get by, and there is no medicine that has been approved to treat these diseases. And unfortunately, about half of the people impacted by rare diseases are children. So as I mentioned, incredible unmet need in this area. And that is one of the main reasons why Saniona has chosen to focus here. Another very important reason for a company from a corporate standpoint to focus on rare diseases is that because the unmet need is so high, many governments and regulatory agencies have created special incentives for companies to work in this area. And that might mean smaller clinical trials. It might mean you have to do fewer studies to get to approval. It might mean that you get tax credits. It might mean that you have exclusivity for a certain period of time in which no other competitors are allowed to come to the market against you. There's a variety of different ways that can look, but it has created a very important program of incentives that make it a very positive endeavor for biotech companies to focus on rare diseases. So I'd like to tell you a little bit more about just a couple of the rare diseases that we focus on at Saniona. So the first one I'd like to tell you about is called hypothalamic obesity. Now, and we refer to that as HO for short. So if I say HO, that's what I mean. the way that hypothalamic obesity occurs is often a child, although sometimes an adult, will be diagnosed with a brain tumor. And that brain tumor is sitting in a region of the brain called the hypothalamus. And so when they undergo surgery to have that brain tumor removed, there is damage done to the hypothalamus, to this area of the brain. And one of the many important functions that happens in this area of the brain is it helps to regulate your weight and your hunger and when you feel full after eating. And so after the surgery, these patients will have very significant weight gain. It comes very quickly, and they have hyperphagia, which is an uncontrolled hunger. Even if they have just eaten a meal, they still feel hungry. And then there are other complications, memory impairment, attention deficits. This disease is thought to impact up to 25,000 people in the US, up to 40,000 in Europe. There are no FDA-approved therapies for hypothalamic obesity. And in fact, there has not even been very many companies trying to come up with therapies in this area. It has been seriously neglected in terms of work to try to help these patients. Saniona is one of the pioneers in this area. And so on this slide, I just wanted to share with you some of the photos from some of the families who we work with through our patient advocacy program. I'm in charge of communications and also patient advocacy at Saniona, and the patients and their families have been incredibly generous in sharing their journeys with us, helping us to better understand the disease, helping us to better understand how we can design our clinical trials to really meet their needs and create the best medicine possible. So here you can see Allie on one side and Silas on the other side. These are both before and after pictures. And so you can really see just immediately after the surgery how their composition of their body has changed, right? You can see from the structure in their faces, you can really see that weight gain. And then Silas's mom, Chelsea, had shared a quote. She said, we had to start locking cabinets, locking our fridge, restricting food, because if he got his hands on it, he wouldn't stop eating it. And I think that really speaks to the fact that this disease is not only a burden for the patient, for the child, but also for their family. The whole family is impacted by this. And, for the caregivers in particular, they really have to struggle with locking up all of their food. And it's a very difficult disorder for caregivers. So now I'm going to tell you about another rare disease called Prater-Willi syndrome, PWS. And so the reason that we are working on both hypothalamic obesity and Prater-Willi syndrome is because, as you can see here at the bottom of the slide, they're very different diseases, but there are some similarities in the struggles and the symptoms that these patients face. So again, Prater-Willi syndrome is actually a genetic disease. So the people who have it are born with it, but it similarly causes severe weight gain. It causes the hyperphagia, which is the uncontrollable hunger. Even after you have just eaten a meal, you feel just as hungry as before you ate. And then a number of social, cognitive, and emotional defects. There are no FDA-approved therapies to address the hyperphagia, which is caregivers tell us this is the most bothersome symptom. This is the thing that really disrupts their lives. That uncontrollable hunger. So that is a big priority. And slightly more common than HO, we're looking at up to 34,000 people in the US, up to 50,000 in Europe. And again, you can see some of the pictures here that the families have been so kind as to share with us and allow us to share with you. William, an 11-year-old, said, it really affects me a lot. I can't really control my hunger. And it's just really hard for me not to just eat every single second. Also, this photo over here of John, Eric, and Aaron, they live in a home for adults with PWS. And unfortunately, that is often the path of this disease. It is very difficult for people with PWS to live independently because of that constant, uncontrollable hunger that makes them want to eat all the time. It's also very difficult for them to hold down a job because I'm sure all of you know when you are in the workplace, there is food around constantly, right? I mean, you might work in a restaurant, that would be incredibly problematic. But even in an office, how many times is there, birthday cake in the kitchen or cupcakes or something? And so all of that is incredibly problematic for them. It makes it very difficult for them to have a normal job and also to live independently. So what are we doing about it at San Iona? I'd like to tell you a little bit about Tesamet. Tesamet is our most advanced medicine. This is an entirely new medicine that was discovered by our scientists, and we are currently developing it to treat both hypothalamic obesity and Prater-Willi syndrome. The way Tesamet works is it works on the reward center and the appetite center in the brain. So it's a pill, it's a capsule, but then it goes into the brain and it increases the level of these three hormones, dopamine, serotonin, and noradrenaline. And what that does is it reduces your craving for food, reduces that appetite, and increases the metabolic fat burn to help with that weight gain. I'll share with you just a bit about what we have seen in our clinical trials to date and the new clinical trials that we're just getting ready to start. Specifically in hypothalamic obesity, we've already conducted an initial phase 2 clinical study, and that achieved its primary endpoint and several secondary endpoints. So as you can see here, we saw a statistically significant reduction in weight, and that was during the double-blind period of the study, which lasted for 24 weeks. After that, the patients were allowed to continue to receive the medication for another 24 weeks, and we saw that reduction in weight maintained. So that's for almost a full year all together there. And we saw this reduction in weight in most of the patients in the trial. So you can see here, over 61% of patients lost at least 5% of their body weight. And that was also a statistically significant finding there. We also saw some good data on HbA1c, which is an important measure of metabolic function in patients with diabetes, because a lot of these folks who are obese also have diabetes. And the majority of the adverse events were mild or moderate in severity. So now we are getting ready to start, before the end of this year, a much larger phase 2B clinical trial in hypothalamic obesity. We're looking to enroll approximately 110 patients. This will be at hospitals across the US and across Europe, Australia. We're looking at a lot of sites outside of the US as well. Again, the primary endpoint will be a change in body weight. And you can see here that we're going to be examining multiple doses. So again, this study is going to start before the end of this year, and we expect to get top-line data in the second half of 2023. A little bit about Prater-Willi syndrome and the data that we have seen here. So here you can see we also have completed an initial phase 2 trial in PWS, and we did see reductions in body weight and hyperphagia in this study here. In adults, you can see there 5.4%, which is a clinically meaningful reduction in body weight, and also 8.1% reduction, or 8.1 point, reduction in hyperphagia. And that's on a 12-point scale. So very, very significant reduction in that hunger there. We did that part of the study in adults. We also then studied this medicine in adolescents, and we looked at a number of different doses. And as we increased the dose there, we saw dose-dependent improvements in hyperphagia and body weight in the adolescent group as well. And again, majority of adverse events were mild or moderate in severity. So similarly to an HO, in PWS, we are also about to start a much larger phase 2B clinical trial. We're looking to start that also before the end of this year. It will enroll about 120 patients, again, at hospitals all across the US and also Europe and other areas outside of the US. Primary endpoint will be hyperphagia. And again, we'll be looking at multiple doses in this study as well. For this study, we anticipate top-line data in the first half of 2023. That's an overview of Tesomet, which, as I mentioned, is our most advanced medicine, and it is for PWS and HO. But one of the most exciting things about Saniona is that we are so much more than Tesomet. And what is interesting is in the biotech field, you will very often find companies that have one product that is in the clinic, and that's all they have, and that's their only bet on success. Or you will find companies that have an early stage discovery engine that is, perhaps preclinical, very, very early stage. It is very hard to find a company that has both. And that is one of the things that I think makes Saniona so unique and so compelling, and one of the reasons that I came to the company. So I want to tell you a bit now about our ion channel drug discovery engine. So what is an ion channel? Excuse me. These are a very, very important target in the body. They move ions, things like sodium and calcium, in and out of your cells. They're important in so many functions in the body. And in fact, some ion channels have already been targeted by drugs that are marketed today and have created a very large $11 billion industry. So these are very successful drugs. However, only 20% of ion channels have been accessed as therapeutics to make drugs targeting them. And so again, that leaves a huge untapped area here for our scientists to work in. And we have created a database of 130,000 ion channel modulators. These are molecules that 20,000 of them are proprietary to us. Our company and our scientists have generated those compounds. And this program has already advanced one candidate into clinical trials. That is SAN711. SAN711 is currently in a phase 1 clinical trial, and we believe that it is going to be useful in treating pain. Then we also have a second candidate, SAN903, that is going to be entering clinical trials next year, and we believe it is going to be useful in possibly in inflammatory and fibrotic diseases, and some other, there are other exciting indications there as well. And we have so many more molecules behind these that our scientists are testing and evaluating to come up with the next best medicine to move forward into our pipeline. And so when you put it all together, this is what our pipeline looks like. We have Tesomet there moving into phase 2B clinical trials in hypothalamic obesity and Prater-Willi syndrome. SAN711 in phase 1, coming up behind it there for neuropathic disorders like neuropathic pain. SAN903 for inflammatory, fibrotic, possibly hematological disorders. That is in preclinical and moving into the clinic next year. So you can see what we're building here is a sustainable engine of medicines to treat important diseases. And so, we hope to be able to bring these to the market one after another after another. So a few key milestones that we've accomplished this year. We have secured Orphan drug designation for Tesomet from the FDA in Prater-Willi syndrome and in hypothalamic obesity. I mentioned at the beginning of this talk that there are incredible incentives to help companies develop drugs for rare diseases. Orphan drug designation is the incentive that is offered by the FDA in the United States. It is very, very important. And so we were incredibly excited to be able to get that designation for both indications this year. And in fact, Saniona is the first company ever to get that designation in hypothalamic obesity. So truly pioneering science going on there. We also moved SAN 711 into its phase 1 clinical trial this year. We also had resolution with the FDA on our regulatory path forward for Tesamet in hypothalamic obesity. As I mentioned, again, there just hasn't been a lot of work there. There hasn't been other companies creating clinical trials and putting plans forward. So we had to do a lot of the pioneering work with the FDA to create a path forward there. And now looking forward, very excited to initiate those phase 2B clinical trials before the end of this year. Then we'll be looking to get the data from our phase 1 trial of SAN 711 in the first half of next year. Also get that very next compound, SAN 903, into the clinic next year. And then the following year, 2023, looking for data from those big phase 2B trials. This is what our future looks like in our eyes. You know, we see incredible potential for Tesamet in HO and PWS, and then for SAN 711 in rare neuropathic disorders, and then for SAN 903 to treat some of these inflammatory and fibrotic diseases, and then for the next compound and the next compound and the next compound after that. In addition, you'll notice business development on here. We recently hired a chief business officer who's going to be focusing on some of the incredible science that our team has already done. And that value is all locked up within Saniona right now. And she's going to be exploring partnering opportunities that can create non-dilutive funding activity for us around some of those opportunities. So in summary, here's our investment rationale for Saniona. Our lead medicine Tesamet entering phase 2B clinical trials in 2 rare disorders where there is significant unmet need and very little competition. We have a deep pipeline of more medicines that are coming out of our ion channel drug discovery engine. We do have validation from multiple strategic partnerships already with companies like Novartis and Boehringer around some of our other ion channel programs. And we, as I mentioned, we are looking to begin to ramp that activity up by bringing on a new chief business officer. And we're well financed to drive our current operating plan. And we have strong support from institutional investors, some of the most prominent healthcare investors in the world, including RA Capital, Pontifex Venture Capital, New Leaf Partners, and New Leaf Venture Partners, and others. So I will stop there. Thank you very much, and we can see if we have any questions.
Well, we do actually. Thank you so much, Trista. And it sounds like you're in a good place. Am I right?
You know, I think we are. I think as some of our very patient Swedish investors would tell you, it is not always reflected in our share price, but we are making incredible progress in the business, in actually bringing these medicines forward through the pipeline. So we're very excited about that.
And why do you want to be presenting you to these investors today?
So, you know, we're here because we want to continue to create awareness of Saniona and create awareness of the work that we are trying to do and the progress that we've made and the exciting milestones that we have coming up. And you know, hopefully more and more people will hear that story and become interested in the company.
And why would this be a good opportunity to invest in you?
Well, you may have seen that there are a lot of rare disease companies in the world who have become very, very successful. Companies like Genzyme, companies like Alexion, companies like Sobi, I think you guys are probably very, very familiar with. And that is our ambition. Our ambition is to build a successful rare disease company that is commercializing not just one, but multiple products around the world. And so I think if, you know, that takes time and it takes money, it takes investment. But I think if that is the kind of thing that your audience is interested in, then I'm happy to be here to share our story with them.
Okay, so you need to be just a little patient.
Yes, it's not easy discovering medicines, and then, as your investors may or may not know, depending on how familiar they are with the process of developing new medicines, but it does take many years. You have to conduct many studies to ensure that these medicines actually do what you think they do, right? Make sure that they actually work and that they're safe. And so it takes some time and some patience. But if that is the kind of thing that you're looking for, if you look at these companies, like I mentioned, like Sobi, these rare disease companies, it can be a very, very successful prospect in the end. I think there is an opportunity to create a lot of value for the patients and a lot of value for the shareholders. That's our goal.
But going into two 2B studies with 2 indications, that must be a really good milestone for you. But how likely is it that will it actually happen before the end of this year?
Yes, absolutely. We've been making incredible progress on that front. We had planned to start those trials around the middle of this year. We had gotten some feedback from the FDA that they needed a little more data on our manufacturing because we had just switched from a tablet to a capsule, which is a different type of pill. It has a number of benefits. And so we've been working very hard to get all that data to them that they need. And we are on track to start these trials before the end of the year.
Mm-hmm. Also, I read something about that you received a minority ownership in Cephagenics. Why is this?
Yes.
Why is this strategic for you? How will it help you?
Sure. So Cephagenics is one of, I mentioned briefly that we have a number of partnerships and agreements with other companies, some large pharmaceutical companies like Novartis, some much smaller startup companies like Cephagenics. But basically, all of these partnerships, or the majority of these partnerships, are focused on our ion channel technology. Saniona is really a world leader in this ion channel science. And so companies come to us from around the world looking to be involved in that, looking to be a part of that, looking for our scientists to use our technology to help them. And then we have also found a variety of programs that we feel are probably going to be better suited for big diseases, not necessarily for rare diseases. And so for those, we have sometimes sought to spin those out into another company or in other ways to use those to form another startup.
Okay. And so I'm thinking of, I guess you're looking for some bigger partner to come in at some point?
Well, that is an interesting question. So one of the things that we have decided about Testament is that ideally, for our lead program for Testament, we would like to be able to bring that all the way to the market ourselves. We have the clinical capabilities already in place to finish the clinical trials, and we feel like we could build a commercial organization. And so the benefit of that approach, right, is that then instead of handing your program to a partner and then you only get a stream of, royalties or milestones from it, you actually own the entire program when you bring it to the market. And so that would be our ideal path forward. Now, that said, we certainly we don't have ambitions to commercialize Testament in some other geographic areas, for example, Asia. So that's something that our new chief business officer will be looking at is, does it make sense to bring in partners in areas where we don't think that we would build necessarily our own commercial infrastructure? So we may be looking for those kind of partnerships. Ideally, we would see ourselves keeping the rights to Testament in the US and probably in Europe, but we'll see how the discussions go.
Okay, well, thank you so much for a peek into the possible futures of Saniona, and good luck on your way.
Thank you so much for having us today. Bye-bye.